When I lost our baby, my partner said it was God's way of saying I'd be a bad mother, then took a healing trip with his ex. While I bled alone, he posted beach pics, so I slid the autopsy report under his hotel door right before his anniversary dinner. I don't think I'll ever forget the sound of that hotel hallway. The way it went so still after I slid the envelope under his door. The way my fingers were shaking, not from nerves, but from rage so deep it made me cold. Inside that envelope was the autopsy report for our baby. The same report he refused to read. I circled the line where he signed the release of remains. Under reason for non-participation, it said, partner unavailable, on personal leave. He'd told me it was God's way of saying I wasn't ready to be a mother. Then he packed a bag, said he needed to clear his head, and flew to the Dominican Republic with his ex, who he claimed was just a friend. I only found out because she posted a story. Her tan legs on a beach chair, his hand on her thigh. Caption, healing energy with my favorite person. Meanwhile, I was at home, bleeding through pads every hour, still waking up every few minutes thinking I felt a kick that wasn't there. My mother couldn't come because she was sick. My best friend lived out of state, so it was just me and the baby blanket I'd bought too early, folded on the couch like an accusation. He didn't call, not once. But he did manage to post a picture of himself smiling on the beach, drink in hand, saying, "Sometimes the universe just forces you to restart." When he finally texted me, it was 2 words. "Hope you're okay." I stared at that message until I couldn't see straight. I didn't reply. I didn't cry either. Something in me just clicked. I called the hospital, requested a full copy of the report with his signature, printed it, highlighted the details he refused to know. The weight, the time, the heartbeat that stopped, and the part that proved he chose to walk away when I needed him most. I booked a ticket to the same resort he was at. Found his room easily. His name was on the guest registry. I waited until 2 a.m. when the hallway was quiet and slid the envelope under his door. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. He'd know it was from me. As I turned to walk away, I saw his ex coming out of the elevator, barefoot, holding her heels. She froze when she saw me. We just stared at each other for a long second, her suntanned, smiling face falling when she recognized me from the photos he'd deleted months ago. Then she whispered, "You shouldn't be here." And I said, "Neither should he." I started walking toward the stairwell. My heart was pounding, not from fear but from something sharper. Because the next morning, when he woke up and saw that envelope, everything he'd built on lies was going to crack open. What he didn't know, what she didn't know, was that the envelope wasn't the only thing I brought with me. And that's where the real part of this story begins. When I met Evan, he seemed like the kind of man who made broken things feel whole again. He had that calm, teacher-like tone when he spoke, always so sure of himself. I was 29, working as a nurse in Cincinnati, still patching myself together after a bad breakup. He was 32, a finance manager who called me steady, said I had healing energy. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue, and within 3 weeks, he was cooking dinner at my place every night, leaving toothbrushes and chargers in my bathroom. Everyone said it was fast, but it felt right. I'd never had someone make me feel so seen. The first crack showed the day I told him I was pregnant. It wasn't planned, but I was happy. Scared, sure, but happy. I expected maybe panic or even awkward silence. What I got was worse. He went quiet for a full minute, then said, "You should probably make sure that's really what you want. We're not stable yet." "We?" I asked. "Or you?" He didn't answer. Over the next few days, he became distant. No more good morning texts, no more coming home early to cook. Just this sense that I was now a problem to solve. He said he needed space to process. When I suggested therapy, he said I was being dramatic. At 10 weeks, I started spotting. I called him from the ER while he was out with friends. He didn't pick up. When he finally arrived hours later, I'd already been told there was no heartbeat. I remember the look on his face, not grief, not shock, just relief. He said, "Maybe it's for the best." God knows how hard kids are. I didn't even recognize his voice. That night I cried until my throat hurt. The next morning he was gone. No note, no call, just his toothbrush missing, his drawer empty. Days later I saw the first picture. Him and her, his ex, the one he swore was ancient history. They were sitting at a restaurant by the ocean, sunset behind them. He captioned it, "Sometimes you have to find light again." The comments were full of congratulations, people saying, "You too look so happy," and "Glad to see you smiling again, bro." And I sat there, bleeding, scrolling, and realizing that everyone thought I had been the problem. He'd told them I was too emotional, that I was unstable after losing it, that I was the one who pushed him away. But I had the receipts, the text messages, the hospital documents, the time stamps. I stopped crying around the fourth day. That's when I started planning. It wasn't about making him hurt physically. No, I wanted him to feel it, to see the truth of what he'd done in a way he couldn't rewrite. So I started collecting everything. Every message, every voicemail, every email. I talked to his HR department by accident, pretending to need help with benefits paperwork. I learned something that made my stomach turn. Something that made me realize his trip with his ex wasn't just about healing. It was about covering something up. And that was when my plan changed. It started with a hunch. Something in the way he vanished so quickly, the timing, the coldness, it didn't feel random. Evan wasn't impulsive, he was calculated. So why fly off with his ex right after the miscarriage? Why act like it was some kind of retreat? I called the HR rep again, pretending to be confused about his insurance coverage. I played the part of the grieving partner, shaky voice and all. "I just don't understand why his insurance stopped covering me so suddenly," I said. She hesitated. "It shouldn't have, unless he changed his dependent status." My stomach dropped. "Changed it to what?" "Single," she said. "As of last month." He'd filed the paperwork before the miscarriage. Before I even knew the baby was gone. He'd already erased me on paper. I started digging deeper. His ex, Lauren, worked at a travel agency. A friend of mine found their posts on a private Facebook group, pictures of them at the same resort in Punta Cana where he was supposedly healing. The timestamps were right after the baby's autopsy date. The part that burned the most? He'd booked the trip while I was still in the hospital. I printed everything, screenshots, receipts, timelines. I made a binder like I was prepping for a court case. Every lie lined up neatly in black and white. Then came the messages from mutual friends. "Evan's really worried about you," one said. "He said you've been acting erratic." Another messaged me, "He told us you were obsessed, that you kept bringing up the baby to make him feel guilty." Obsessed. That word stuck in my head like a thorn. The night I found out he changed his insurance, I went through every old photo and message we ever shared. I wasn't looking for comfort, I was looking for something to break. And then I found it. An email from his work addressed to his ex. Sent a week before the miscarriage. The subject line said, "Our restart," the body read. "It's finally happening. She'll be out of the picture soon. I'll make sure it's clean." I read it 3 times, my chest tightening, mind spinning. "She'll be out of the picture soon." He couldn't have meant what I think he meant, right? I wanted to believe it was about breaking up. But when I thought about the way he ignored me that night, the way he looked relieved at the hospital, something in me knew. I sent the email to my personal account. Printed that too. That was the night I decided to follow him. I booked the same resort, found his room number, and waited. But the trip wasn't just about confrontation anymore. It was about making him face the one truth he couldn't manipulate, delete, or twist, the reality of what he'd done to our child, and to me. Still, I had no idea that when I finally saw him there, I'd uncover something even worse. Something that made me realize I hadn't lost everything yet, because he was planning to take more. The resort looked like a postcard, palm trees, white sand, couples holding hands. I hated every inch of it. I checked in under my maiden name using a prepaid card. The clerk barely looked up when I asked if Mr. Evan R. was staying there. He smiled politely. "Yes, ma'am. Room 412. When I got to his floor, I saw him before he saw me. He was by the pool bar, laughing, a drink in hand, arm draped over Lauren's chair. She looked exactly like she did online. Gold hair, perfect tan, the type of woman who never has to ask for attention because the world just gives it to her. He looked happy. Effortlessly, casually happy, like the last few months never happened. Like the baby never existed. I hid behind a palm planter, shaking but focused. I snapped pictures. Him kissing her. Him checking his phone, smirking. Him holding her waist, the same way he used to hold me when he'd say, "You're safe with me." Then she leaned over and said something that made him choke on his drink. He laughed, but it looked forced. She pulled out her phone, showed him something on the screen. His face went pale. That's when I realized she wasn't smiling at him, she was smiling at what she was showing him. I managed to get close enough to hear one word. Insurance. He grabbed her wrist and hissed, "Not here." My whole body went cold. Insurance. I remembered the policy forms I'd filled out months ago, the ones where he'd added me as a dependent and the baby as pending. He'd made me sign a life insurance add-on when we talked about future planning. At the time, I thought it was sweet. Responsible. But if he'd changed the paperwork before the miscarriage, I went back to my room and logged into the old shared email we once used for bills. I found the insurance portal. My name wasn't listed anymore, but there was a secondary policy, one that had both his and Lauren's names on it. It had been submitted 1 week after the baby's autopsy. And the payout beneficiary? Lauren. The coverage line made me feel like I'd been punched. Dependent coverage termination due to miscarriage, policy closed, medical claim pending. He'd claimed the miscarriage. He'd filed it like a transaction. And Lauren knew. She was part of it. That's when it all started fitting together, the trip, the timing, the strange phrasing in his email. He hadn't just moved on fast. He'd used my loss for money. I wanted to scream, to tear through the walls. But instead, I sat down and took a breath. Because if I exploded now, it'd just be another scene he could twist. The unstable ex showing up to cause drama. No, I was going to let him hang himself. So I texted him. The first message since everything. Me, "I hope you're healing." Him, "Trying to, you should too, you're scaring people." Me, "I'm here too, you know." It took him 2 minutes to reply. Him, "What do you mean here?" I didn't answer. I knew he'd panic, and when he panicked, he'd slip. He did. Within an hour, I got an email, from him, a desperate, stupid one. It said, "Whatever you think you know about the insurance, it's not what it looks like. Please don't talk to anyone." He didn't realize he'd just confirmed it was real. And that's when I knew how to destroy him. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the balcony of my room overlooking the ocean, the sound of waves hitting the shore while I went through every document again. Every email, every screenshot, every recorded voicemail. By sunrise, I had a plan. Not a fantasy, not some impulsive idea, an exact sequence of steps. Precise, measured, irrefutable. I started with a copy of the insurance policy. I downloaded every form he'd filed electronically, including the claim for loss compensation. I noticed he'd attached the hospital's discharge report, the one with my name misspelled, where I was listed as non-responsive partner. He'd forged a digital signature that looked almost like mine. Almost. Then, I called the insurance company. I pretended to be a grieving spouse looking for confirmation of a pending claim. The woman on the line told me the case was under review due to inconsistencies. That told me 2 things. They already suspected something. They didn't yet know how deep it went. I decided to give them a little help. I created a folder labeled for investigation use only and filled it with every file that tied him to that fraud. I didn't just send it to the claims department. I sent it to the company's fraud division, the HR department at his firm, and a journalist who specialized in financial misconduct. No message, no signature, just evidence. Then I printed a second copy. That one wasn't for them, it was for him. I placed it in the same white envelope that held our baby's autopsy report, slid it under his hotel room door at 2 a.m., just like before. But I wasn't done. While I was at the resort, I'd made friends with one of the housekeeping staff, Rosa. She was kind, chatty, and didn't ask many questions. I told her my boyfriend had lost something valuable in his room and that I wanted to leave him a surprise. I slipped her a $50 bill and asked when she cleaned room 412. "Morning, around 10:30, she said. "Could you make sure he finds this when you're done?" I handed her a small sealed box. Inside, a USB drive with the same files. Labeled simply, "You can't insure grief." By the time she'd deliver it, I'd be on a plane back to Cincinnati. The last piece of my plan was poetic, in a way. I logged into our old shared Google Photos account. He'd forgotten to revoke my access. I created an album titled "The Restart You Paid For." It had one image, the sonogram, the only one we ever had. Below it, I added a caption. Her name was Everly. "You said she'd be the reason you'd become a better man." Then I shared it publicly, tagging his name. Within hours, people began commenting. Old coworkers, family, even his church friends. The ones he'd told I was too emotional. They saw the truth, the timestamps, the receipts. the beach photos beside hospital records. But the most satisfying part wasn't the chaos, it was knowing that he hadn't even seen it yet. Because when he did, when he woke up to that avalanche of messages, calls, and notifications, the real unraveling would begin. He'd think that was the worst part. But the second twist, that was still coming, and it would make everything else look merciful. I thought I'd already seen the worst of him. I thought I understood every layer of the lie. But a week after I got back home, I received an email that made my stomach drop all over again. It wasn't from him. It was from Lauren. Subject line, "You need to know what he told me." The message started polite, almost cautious. "I saw what you posted. I didn't know everything, but I think you deserve to know what he told me before we left for the trip." I almost deleted it. I didn't want her pity. But then I scrolled down and saw the screenshots attached. The first was a text from Evan to her, dated 2 weeks before the miscarriage. "She's not stable. Doctor says there's a risk of complications because of her anxiety. If it happens, it happens. It might be easier in the long run." Then another, sent the night before I went to the ER. "Don't worry, it's almost over. We'll be free soon." Free. He used that word like my baby was a burden he couldn't wait to drop. But what froze me was the voice memo she attached next. His voice, calm, almost smug. "If the miscarriage goes through naturally, it's not my fault. We don't have to fake anything, it's just easier." I had to sit down. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped my phone. He hadn't caused it directly, but he'd counted on it. He'd known I was spotting, known I was scared, and he'd left me alone on purpose, hoping nature would take care of his problem. Lauren's message ended with, "I thought he was just trying to move on from a bad relationship. I didn't know he left you like that. I'm done with him. He's in hiding now, his job fired him, the fraud department's investigating. But I think he's planning to blame you. He said he has proof that you harassed him and made false claims. Be careful." Proof. That word rang in my head for hours. I hadn't spoken to him, hadn't threatened him, but I realized how easy it would be for him to twist the narrative again. All he needed to do was play the same old card, the emotional ex-girlfriend story. So I did something I hadn't planned. I filed a formal report with the insurance company, with law enforcement, and attached the screenshots Lauren sent. I wanted it on record. I wanted it to exist somewhere he couldn't bury it. Then I called his mother. She answered softly, like she already knew who it was. "He's gone, isn't he?" she said. "Gone where?" I asked. She sighed. "He drained his accounts and left town, said he was being persecuted. Said you were obsessed and dangerous." I laughed, an ugly, hollow sound. "He's right about one thing," I said. "I am dangerous, just not in the way he thinks." Because what he didn't know was that every system he tried to play, the company, the insurance, even the woman he used, they were all already watching him. And he was about to find out that running from guilt doesn't mean escaping it. Still, Lauren's email ended with one last sentence that I couldn't stop replaying. "He told me he only did what he did because of what you told him that night." What did you say to him? I didn't even remember saying anything unusual that night. But the question got under my skin. What did I tell him right before everything went wrong? And when I finally remembered, it made everything even darker. Because I hadn't realized I'd given him the idea. It took me a few days to remember exactly what I'd said that night, the night before I lost the baby. I'd been bleeding a little, scared out of my mind, and he wouldn't pick up his phone. When he finally walked in hours later, smelling like whiskey and perfume, I was sitting on the bathroom floor, crying. I remember looking up at him and saying, "You don't want this baby, just admit it." He didn't say anything at first. He just stared at me blank, like he was somewhere else entirely. Then I said the words that sealed it. "Maybe God will decide for us." He smiled, actually smiled. A small, strange one that I didn't understand back then. Now I did, because in his mind that was permission, that was the loophole. When Lauren's screenshots surfaced and investigators started digging, they found everything. His searches for miscarriage risks, herbal natural induction methods, even a text to a friend saying, "She's been bleeding a little. Probably won't make it full term. Thank God." He hadn't poisoned me, hadn't touched me, but he'd known exactly what would happen if I was left alone, panicking, untreated. He'd chosen to let it happen. He'd chosen to let me break, quietly and cleanly, so he could walk away untouched. That was his reason, his twisted sense of control, He told Lauren he didn't want to be the bad guy, he wanted the universe to take care of it. He said if it ended naturally, then no one could blame him. He called it fate. I called it cowardice. And the worst part, he'd convinced himself it was merciful, that by doing nothing, he was being kind. The fraud investigator told me something else, too. Apparently, after the claim was denied, Evan tried to refile it under emotional trauma compensation. He used screenshots of my texts, the ones where I was begging him to come home, as proof of mental instability. He was trying to profit off the pain he created. Every time I thought I'd hit the bottom of what a person could do, he dug deeper. But hearing his reason, he didn't leave because he stopped loving me. He left because he thought love made him weak. He told people I was the kind of woman who traps you. I wasn't a partner to him. I was an inconvenience he needed to erase. And he almost did. But now, everyone who mattered, the company, the press, even his family, knew who he really was. The story wasn't mine alone anymore. It was his, too. He'd wanted a clean escape. Instead, he left fingerprints everywhere. And I wasn't done yet. Because revenge wasn't just about justice, it was about making sure he could never rewrite this story again. When the investigator called to say the fraud case was officially open, I didn't feel relief right away. I felt hollow, like my body hadn't caught up to the truth yet. Evan's name was on a federal watch list, his accounts frozen, his job gone. He'd burned every bridge and still, part of me couldn't rest, because I knew what he'd do next. He'd find another story to tell, another audience to believe him, and I wasn't going to let that happen. I went quiet for a few weeks. Didn't post, didn't reply to messages, didn't take calls. I wanted him to think I'd moved on. And that's when he resurfaced, on a small business page under a fake name, claiming to offer grief counseling for couples who'd lost pregnancies. His bio read, "Helping people heal through faith and acceptance." He was selling my pain as his redemption arc. So I made sure his new followers saw the truth. I didn't need to yell. I just dropped links, public documents, the official fraud case number, screenshots, news articles. Then I posted one final thing, a photo. It was the sonogram again, next to a screenshot of his grief counseling profile, captioned, "He says he helps people heal. I wonder if he tells them how he left his own fiancée bleeding on the bathroom floor while he was on the beach with someone else." The post went viral within hours. Hundreds of shares. People tagging him, tagging his new alias, tagging the page. He shut it down that night. A week later, a mutual friend texted me a screenshot, his mugshot. He'd been picked up for fraud and identity falsification after trying to use a fake SSN to open a new account. The headline was simple: "Local man under investigation for insurance fraud and false identity after claiming miscarriage payout." I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just stared at it until I felt something quiet settle in my chest, like the world had finally tilted back to where it should have been. Lauren testified in the investigation. She apologized to me in person. She looked thin, shaken, but sincere. "I didn't know," she said again. I believed her. She'd been his next mark, same as me. The day the case went public, I went back to the hospital. I brought flowers to the memorial garden, where they plant trees for lost babies. I left a note under the soil that said, "Everlie, you were real. He tried to make us both disappear. But now everyone remembers you." When I walked out, the air felt lighter. Not peaceful exactly, but earned. Evan never contacted me again. Last I heard, he was out on bail, living in another state, broke and alone. People always ask me why I didn't just move on, why I had to make it public. Because silence is how men like him survive. They count on it. They feed on it. He wanted to erase me. Instead, his name became a warning. And that's all the closure I needed. Before I left the garden, I whispered the same words he once said to me, only this time, I meant them differently. Sometimes the universe just forces you to restart. Only this time, it was my restart. Not his. A man who can engineer a moral debt can turn kindness into leverage, and that leverage buys better clothes, better nights, better stories for parties. He'd learned to sell being saved. There was a folder in his online drives labeled assets. In plain text, not inked in code or joke, lists of names, small notes beside them: donor, high social value, good for future favors, family likely to support. My name had next to it. Emotional leverage, possible long-term loan. The language was clinical, like a banker's, but aimed at people. He cataloged affection and charity like inventory. And the cruelest part, the thing that made me physically sick, was that he liked the theater of it. He told me once, months before the transplant, that people show you who they are when they need something. He wasn't saying it as a lament. He was saying it as a business plan. He had refined how to spot the types who would swing toward help. Volunteers, dog rescuers, brownie bakers, people who believed in moral accounting. He trained Kayla and others to be friendly, to steer conversations, to make urgency feel urgent. He made hospitals a marketplace and kindness the product. Why mock me later in front of friends? Because he wanted to strip me of dignity after he'd taken my organ. Mocking turned me into a story he could tell. Donor Girl reduced me from person to transaction in his ledger. It made other people laugh and made him feel better about what he'd done. That's the worst thing about sociopaths. They don't just hurt you. They polish the wound into a spectacle and invite others to admire the cut. He'd also learned how to manipulate guilt to his advantage. He used the voicemail, the crying, the promises like receipts. When people called him cruel, he played the tape and watched them melt. He begged me, he'd say, and everyone would step back, uncomfortable, because saving someone is supposed to feel noble and saving someone is supposed to create debt. He weaponized the idea of being saved. The ledger proved it wasn't random. Mark had been steadily turning human kindness into social capital for years. He'd practiced disgrace as a craft. Kayla wasn't an innocent helper who fell in love in a hospital bed. She was part of a machine that rewarded the people who made the deals happen. They'd trained the clinic to move faster, to make consent easier, to nudge the lonely into saying yes. Hearing the ledger's truth rewired my anger into something harder. It wasn't about a broken heart anymore. It was about a person who'd used a place that promises care as if it were a strip mall, cashing out on compassion. There was no tragic illness to mourn. There was only calculation and ease. That's when I stopped feeling like a victim and started feeling like an avenger. Not righteous, not healed, just precise. I had the receipts and the ledger and the proof that this was a pattern. I knew the shape of his map. I knew how he had traveled it. And I knew, with a coldness I hadn't expected, what would have to burn for the ledger to mean anything at all. I didn't want fireworks. I wanted inevitability, the slow arithmetic of consequences that leaves no room for spin. The plan I'd built in quiet turned into a single, public collapse, and it worked the way a well-placed lever works. Small push, everything gives. I let the journalist have the exclusive. She ran the piece on a Thursday morning, timeline, screenshots, voicemail, ledger excerpts, and Jana's corroboration. The headline was clinical and mean and perfect. Hospital ring used kindness as currency. Internal files expose transplant scheme. I watched the shares climb with a tired kind of vigilance. Comments, outraged threads, a local TV station sniffing for on-camera indignation. Mark's phone went silent for a minute and then rang like a bell that could not stop. People I hadn't spoken to in years texted me a string of shocked emojis and then apologies. Some were real. Some were people repositioning themselves on a safer moral bank. Kayla's mother, the woman who'd sent me a passive-aggressive birthday card once, messaged me in a panic before anyone else called her. I sent her a copy of the receipts and a note. You can ask her why she called me donor girl at a party. She didn't reply. Within 48 hours, the hospital issued a statement. We are cooperating with investigators. They did that because lawyers told them to, and because insurance doesn't like surprise bankruptcies. Kayla was put on administrative leave. Mark's boss called HR and then called me, awkwardly, as if sympathy could erase ledger entries. HR opened a file. The state medical board started asking for records. Jana, the nurse who'd helped me, was offered witness protection in a sense, anonymous testimony, a lawyer's number. I watched them all start to untangle, the way a sweater comes apart at a tug. I felt bad, sometimes, in the way you feel bad because a nail you hit bent someone's ego instead of their skull. Lives were complicated. Consequences rippled. But then I thought of the donors in the files, the lonely, the kind, the people who'd been nudged into giving a piece of themselves for someone who turned their charity into profit. I thought of how I'd woken up and found my body was proof on a ledger. I thought of the way he'd mocked me, the way she'd called me a nickname meant to erase me. They wanted to make me small, so I made their method visible. The legal stuff moved like molasses. Lawsuits were filed. There were press conferences with muffled remorse. Mark's mother sat on TV and cried in that practiced way people do when cameras are on. I didn't watch the trial. I watched the ledger move from private to public and felt the word, accountability, click into place like a safety. The revenge I wanted, the one that left me breathing easier at night, wasn't him in a cell or a headline that killed him. It was the reclamation of my story. I stopped being the donor girl in other people's mouths. Friends who stayed learned the full version. People who voted with their silence found their feeds full of receipts. The name that once shrank me became the title of the article the journalist tucked in her lead about corporate exploitation. When it was finally done, when the investigators closed their initial findings, and the hospital announced personnel changes and a review board, I went back to the river where we'd first met. It was raining the same odd Portland rain, soft and steady. I folded my scarf into my hands and thought about how I'd given away a part of me and then taken back something harder. My narrative. He did what he did because he could. I did what I did because I had to. There is no heroic cadence to my actions. There is only a ledger balanced at last. I kept one thing private. The voicemail he left, the one I'd uploaded and used like an exhibit. I never deleted it, because weapons become trophies if you keep them. I played it once, alone, late, to remind myself of how far I'd come. His voice broke the same way it always had, desperate, slick with promise. I listened and felt nothing explosive, just a hollow where anger used to live. Then I tossed the phone into a drawer, shut it, and walked home. The city smelled like wet asphalt and possibility. I was tired, still sore, scar-sharp beneath my ribs. But I felt something I hadn't in a long time, the quiet, boring kind of closure that paperwork and truth can give. I didn't need to be vengeful forever. I needed to be thorough. And thorough, in the end, was enough. Kicker. Turns out the best medicine for being too kind is a spreadsheet and a bad faith exposure. And I got both.